Today was my 35th birthday. I woke up feeling the usual aches and pains that came with my chronic illness, a constant companion since childhood. As the CEO of a thriving tech startup, I usually masked my pain with work and caffeine, but not today. Today felt different, heavier somehow. I decided a trip to the private clinic was necessary, a place I'd come to view almost as a second home. I knew most of the staff by name, but it was Tom, the young nurse, who always caught my attention. Tom was charming, with a quick smile that made many of the patients blush, myself included. He was also persistent. Today, when I walked through the clinic's doors, he was the first to greet me. "Happy birthday, Elena," looking sharp as always. He grinned, his eyes lighting up as he approached me. "You know, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here, you know." I sighed, settling onto the clinic bed. "Appreciate it, Tom, but you know my situation. It's complicated." As Tom prepared the drip, he didn't miss a beat. "I don't care about your illness, Elena. I like you. Whenever you're ready to talk about us, I'm here." As Tom busied himself with the charts, I tried to focus on the positives. I was successful, I was independent, but as much as I hated to admit it, I was lonely too. The day dragged on with the usual rounds of tests and doctor's visits. By late afternoon, I was ready to head back home, but Tom had other ideas. "Hey, birthday girl, you can't just go home and mope. Let's grab dinner, my treat. Let's celebrate you," he insisted. I hesitated. It was tempting to spend more time with him outside the sterile clinic walls. "Okay, but just as friends." "Just as friends," he agreed, but the twinkle in his eye said more. Dinner with Tom was easy and filled with laughter. He had a way of making me forget about the clinical coldness of my routine. As we talked, it wasn't just about my health or the clinic, it was about movies, travel, and food. It was normal, and for a moment, I let myself enjoy it. "Elena, you're incredible, you know that?" Tom said as he walked me to my car afterward. "Listen, I meant what I said earlier. I want to be there for you, in whatever way you let me." I looked up at him, the streetlights casting shadows across his earnest face. "Tom, it's not that simple. My life, my health, it's a lot for anyone to handle." "I'm not just anyone, Elena. I'm the guy who's asking you to take a chance on me," he replied, his voice steady and sure. I felt a rush of emotions. Here was this wonderful man, willing to accept me with all my complications. "Let's take it slow, okay?" As I drove home, his invitation replayed in my mind. Maybe, just maybe, I could let myself have this slice of happiness. After all, wasn't life too short to spend alone? 6 months flew by faster than I could have imagined. Tom and I were seeing each other regularly, and every moment spent together seemed to ease the constant discomfort of my illness. He made everything feel simpler, lighter. Yet, beneath the surface, I harbored reservations about our future given my health, but Tom never seemed to waver. One crisp Saturday evening, as the autumn leaves painted the city in hues of orange and red, Tom suggested a walk through the park after dinner. "Elena, you know I'm not much for fancy speeches, right?" Tom started, his voice a bit shaky, which was unlike him. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about how happy you make me. I want this to be a forever thing." I felt my heart skip a beat. "Tom, are you sure? You know my situation. It's not going to get any easier." "Yeah, I know. And I don't care. I want all of it, the good days, the bad days, and everything in between." He then took a small box out of his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple, yet beautiful ring. "Elena, will you marry me?" The proposal caught me off guard. I knew I loved him, but commitment at this level was something I hadn't allowed myself to consider seriously because of my health complications. Seeing him there, so sure of us, made all my defenses start to crumble. "Yes, Tom. Yes, I'll marry you." We embraced, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to disappear. It was just us, and it felt right. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning. We decided on a small ceremony, nothing fancy, just us and a few close friends, including his sister and her husband. But before any of that, I needed to address the practicalities of our future together. Sitting down with Tom one evening, I brought out the prenuptial agreement I had drawn up. I want to talk about something a bit, well, practical. It's important, given my business and my health. Tom nodded. Anything, Elena. I handed him the papers. It's a prenup. He took the documents, scanning them briefly before looking up at me with a smile. If that makes you feel secure, I'm okay with it. I'm not here for the money, Elena. I'm here for you. And you're sure? You're really sure about this? I pressed, needing to hear it just one more time. Absolutely, he assured me, signing the document without a second thought. Now, can we go back to planning our tiny wedding? Yeah, we can, I replied, feeling a mixture of relief and love. Tom's easy acceptance of the prenup reassured me of his intentions and commitment. Our wedding day was simple and perfect. The city hall ceremony was quick, and the only people present were those we loved most. Standing there, exchanging vows with Tom, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, life was giving me a chance to have something beautiful, despite everything. Life after our quiet little wedding was, for a while, pretty close to what I'd imagined as perfect. Tom and I settled into our new life together, and he took over running the household. It was a nice change. I'd come home to incredible smells wafting from the kitchen, and the place looked spotless. The first few months felt like we were in some sort of honeymoon phase that just kept going. But about a year in, things started to change subtly. I noticed that Tom seemed a bit off. His enthusiasm for things around the house began to wane, and he seemed more withdrawn. At first, I chalked it up to the adjustment of living together or the end of the honeymoon phase, but the shift was palpable. One day, I came home early to surprise him with news about a potential new client for my business. I walked in, expecting to find him bustling around in the kitchen or maybe sorting out the laundry. Instead, the house was quiet, too quiet. Puzzled, I walked towards the kitchen, and that's when I heard it, voice. I paused by the door, listening. A woman's voice, cheerful and unfamiliar, chatting away as if she owned the place. Pushing the door open, I saw a middle-aged woman, humming as she chopped vegetables. She looked up, startled. Oh, you must be Elena. I'm June. Tom didn't say you'd be home this early. June? And who exactly are you? I managed to keep my voice steady, despite the shock. I'm the housekeeper. Tom hired me about a year ago. I come in a few times a week to clean up and cook. Makes things easier, you know? She smiled, clearly unaware of the bomb she'd just dropped. A housekeeper? For a year? And I had no clue? I felt a mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me, but I kept it together. Right, I see. Thanks, June. Would you mind giving us a moment? Of course. She wiped her hands and left the room. When Tom came home, he found me sitting in the living room, still processing everything. His face fell the moment he saw my expression. Who's June, Tom? I asked bluntly. Tom hesitated, then sighed. She's the housekeeper. Look, I meant to tell you, but I thought you'd be upset about me not doing the stuff around the house myself. Upset? Tom, you think I'd be upset about who cleans or cooks? I'm upset because you lied, because you thought this was something you had to hide. My voice rose with every word. I know, and I'm sorry. It started small, and then I just didn't know how to bring it up without making it a big deal. It seemed easier to just keep it going. He tried to explain, looking genuinely remorseful. Easier for who, Tom? Because this doesn't feel easy for me. I shot back. We talked it out that night. He apologized, and I tried to understand his perspective. But something had shifted between us, a small crack that made me wonder what else he might not be telling me. Things smoothed over a bit after that, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Tom continued to be great at making dinner and keeping the house in order, but now I knew he wasn't the one actually doing all the work. It felt like our roles were clear. I worked, and he managed the home, except he didn't really manage it, he outsourced it. And yet something about Tom's behavior was off, and it wasn't just the hidden housekeeper issue. His late-night whispers on the phone, his sudden need for privacy, and his constant excuses for needing more money, it all added up to something sinister. So, I did what any self-respecting woman with my resources would do. I hired a private detective. It wasn't long before the detective came back with news, and it wasn't the kind I'd hoped for. Tom was spending most of his days at a casino, and the sums of money he was losing were staggering. I felt a mix of relief and despair, relief that there wasn't another woman, but despair at the size of his deception. That evening, when Tom came home, I was waiting for him in the living room, the detective's report in hand. He tried to kiss me hello, but I stepped back, holding up the papers. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice cold and more composed than I felt. Tom sank down onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to get this out of hand. It started small, just a way to blow off some steam. But it got bigger, and I didn't know how to stop." "And you thought the best way to deal with it was to lie to me? To steal from me?" My voice was rising now, my temper flaring. "I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry. I need help. I want to quit, I swear. I need your help to get out of this mess." His voice was desperate, pleading. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. "I'll help you, Tom, but this is the last time. You need to get treatment for your addiction, and you're going to sign a receipt acknowledging the debt I'm paying off. It's $50,000, Tom." $50,000. Tom nodded miserably. "Yes, anything you say. I'll do it. I'll get help." We arranged for him to start treatment the following week. But just when I thought we might be finding our way back to some sort of normalcy, Tom dropped another bombshell. Out of the blue, he said, "Elena, I've been thinking, maybe we should have a baby. It might bring us closer." I stared at him, incredulous. "A baby? Tom, you know I can't. It's not just risky, it could be fatal for me." He quickly tried to backpedal. I know. I just thought, never mind." But the idea didn't go away. It kept coming up, more and more. Even his sister, an obstetrician, called me about it. "You should reconsider, Elena. Having a baby is the most natural thing. Don't be selfish." "Selfish? You're a doctor. You know my condition. How can you even suggest such a thing?" I was furious. She scoffed and hung up on me. The conversation left me shaken. How could they be so callous, so cruel? Months of tension and unresolved arguments had frayed my nerves, but nothing could have prepared me for the scene I walked into that fateful day. I returned home earlier than usual, my steps quickening with the anticipation of a quiet evening. Instead, I opened the door to chaos, boxes piled up, and Tom's sister, Lisa, and her husband, Mark, arranging their belongings around my living room. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the noise. Lisa turned to face me, an unnerving calmness to her demeanor. "Oh, we're moving in, Elena. This is Tom's place, and you should really start packing your things." My eyes flicked to Tom, searching for some sign of confusion or disagreement on his face, but there was none. Instead, he met my gaze with a look that chilled me to the bone. "Elena, I can't do this anymore. You've been manipulating and controlling me for years. It's over," Tom declared, his voice cold and distant. I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Manipulating you? Tom, what are you talking about?" "You heard him," Mark chimed in, his voice just as harsh. "He's done being your slave." Tom stepped forward, a stack of papers in hand. "Here are the divorce papers. I'm also filing for compensation for years of emotional abuse and alimony. I need to look after my well-being now." The room spun as I took the papers from his hand. This was a nightmare. I glanced through the documents, each word a betrayal. But rising panic gave way to a steely calm. I let out a laugh, short and devoid of humor. "Well, you're in for a surprise." but go on, think what you want. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Without another word, I went to our bedroom, packed a suitcase with essentials, and prepared to leave. There was no point in arguing. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was gone. I drove away from the apartment and headed toward the elite cottage village where I had a house waiting, a home that was truly mine, bought long before Tom entered my life. As I passed the familiar gates and nodded to the guards, a weight lifted off my shoulders. The house was exactly as I left it, spacious, quiet, and tailored to my needs. It had always been my sanctuary, a place I had prepared for my future, knowing my health might take a turn for the worse. As night fell, I made a few phone calls, informing my closest friends of the situation and reassuring them I was okay. My lawyer was up next, ready to discuss our strategy. Tom and his outrageous claims would not go unchallenged. A few days after settling into my sanctuary, I was startled by a frantic call from Tom. His voice, laced with panic and fury, blared through the phone. "Elena, you've set me up. This is some kind of sick game to you, isn't it?" Calmly, with a small smile, I replied, "Tom, if you think there's been a misunderstanding, why don't you come over and we'll talk about it? I'll send you the address." Soon after, the village gates swung open, and Tom, alongside Lisa and her husband Mark, drove through. I watched from the window as their car pulled up, their faces pressed against the car windows, eyes wide as they took in the view of my expansive home. They approached my front door, still gaping at the luxurious setting, their previous bravado seeming to shrink a bit. As I opened the door, I couldn't help but cough to clear the silence, then offered a wry smile. "Well, what brings you to my humble abode?" Tom, regaining some of his earlier fire, blurted out, "Your lawyer called me. He said I have to pay next month's rent for the apartment, $6,000. You never told me it wasn't your apartment. You never asked about it, and if you want to live in this apartment, pay the rent," I explained with deliberate patience. Lisa, ever the opportunist, chimed in, elbowing Tom. "And what about this place? It's gorgeous." Tom nodded vigorously. "Yeah, why don't you just give us this house instead of that apartment? Otherwise, we'll sue you for everything you've got." Their audacity was almost comical. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "You want to sue me for this house? Tom, dear, I bought this house long before you were in the picture. You have no claim over it whatsoever." Their faces turned red with frustration, and the shouting escalated. "You can't just kick us out. We have rights," Tom yelled. "That's where you're wrong," I replied, my voice firm as I picked up the phone. "Security, could you please escort these people out? They seem to be lost." Within minutes, the village security arrived, and the trio was promptly shown out. As they were escorted away, their indignant protests faded into the distance, leaving behind a quiet that settled over the house like a comforting blanket. After they left, I sat back down, the laughter gone, replaced by a weary sigh. It was clear that Tom and his sister were grasping at straws, trying to intimidate me into giving up what was rightfully mine. I called my lawyer again, going over the details of the day's confrontation. "We need to be prepared for whatever they might try next," I told him, my tone resolute. "Don't worry, Elena. We'll handle this. They have no legal standing," he reassured me. The day of the court hearing arrived with a tension thick enough to slice through. I walked into the courtroom, my lawyer at my side, ready to face whatever Tom and his family had concocted. The allegations were ludicrous. Tom claimed that I had exploited him, turning him into what he dramatically referred to as my slave. He recounted stories of endless chores and a thankless life under my supposed tyranny, all while his sister Lisa and her husband Mark nodded vigorously, echoing his every word. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Luckily, it was soon our turn to present the reality of the situation. My lawyer stood, adjusting his suit jacket with a calm assurance. "Your Honor, we have evidence that contradicts every single one of Mr. Thomas's claims," he stated confidently, then turned to call our first witness. The au pair Tom had hired, June, came forward. I worked in their home, doing all the household chores and cooking. Mr. Thomas Elliot hardly lifted a finger, she testified, her statement backed by employment records and salary slips proving Tom hardly contributed to the household work as he claimed. After June's testimony, my lawyer presented the prenuptial agreement. As per this legally binding document, signed by both parties, he continued, pointing to the signatures at the bottom of the page. It clearly states that in the event of a divorce, Mr. Elliott is entitled to nothing. No alimony, no compensation. The courtroom was silent as the weight of the document sank in. Tom's face drained of color when my lawyer added, "Mr. Elliott, did you read this document before you signed it?" Tom stuttered. "Well, I saw the part about if something happened to Elena, but you didn't read it all. Is that correct?" my lawyer pressed. "Yes, but I didn't think." "You didn't think to read what you were signing," my lawyer cut him off, turning back to the judge. "Your Honor, we also wish to present proof of Mr. Elliott gambling debts, which Mrs. Elliott generously cleared, and for which we have a signed acknowledgement from Mr. Elliott himself." I watched as Tom slumped in his seat, the reality of his situation finally hitting him. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was clear and firm. "After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimonies, it is this court's decision to grant the divorce requested by Mrs. Elena Elliott. Furthermore, all claims for compensation and alimony by Mr. Thomas Elliott are denied." As we walked out of the courtroom, a sense of profound relief washed over me. But that relief was quickly overshadowed by the spectacle outside the courtroom. Lisa was furiously berating Tom, her words sharp and unforgiving. "You fool. All you had to do was get her pregnant and died, then we could have had everything. You couldn't even do that right." I stopped for a moment to take in the scene, the reality of their treachery settling in deeper. They hadn't just wanted money, they had hoped for my demise. Months had passed since the courtroom drama had unfolded, and I had slowly begun to reclaim my peace, focusing on my health and my business. One crisp morning, as I sipped my coffee and reviewed some business reports, the serenity was abruptly disrupted by an unexpected visitor. I glanced at the security monitor and saw Tom, looking disheveled and desperate, at the gates of my village. I instructed the guards to let him in, curious yet cautious about his sudden appearance. As he approached the front door, I could see the strain in his face, the weight of his recent hardships etched into his features. He fell to his knees as soon as I opened the door, an act so dramatic it almost seemed rehearsed. "Elena, please, I'm begging you, take me back. I'll do anything. I'll cook, clean, anything you want. Just let me stay here," he pleaded, his voice breaking. I stared down at him, my expression calm yet firm. "Tom, after everything, why would you think I'd ever consider such a thing? It wasn't all my idea, Elena. It was Lisa's plan to push for the baby, to end things that way. I never wanted any of it to happen. I swear, I was just caught up in it," he blurted out, desperation seeping through his every word. I took a deep breath, keeping my composure. "Tom, what you're failing to understand is that it's not just about what happened, or who planned what. It's about trust. And you broke that beyond repair. You didn't just follow Lisa's plans, you stood by her knowing full well how dangerous her schemes were for me." He scrambled to his feet, reaching out as if he could physically pull back the relationship we once had. "Elena, I'm lost without you. I've taken out a loan to pay back the $50,000, and I've started working again. I'm trying to fix my mistakes." "Fixing your mistakes doesn't mean you get to rewind and erase the consequences," I replied sharply. "What you need to understand, Tom, is that you chose this path. Now you must walk it alone." His face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then I remembered the cold, calculating discussions about my health and potential demise. "I want you to leave. Now," I said, my voice unwavering. "And Tom, don't come back. You are not welcome here, not now, not ever." When he hesitated, still trying to muster another plea, I turned and signaled to the security personnel who had discreetly remained close by. They stepped forward, escorting him away as he called out my name, his cries fading into the distance. After he was gone, I stood at the doorway for a few moments, letting the silence wash over me again. This house, This life, I had built it, and I would not let anyone disrupt it again. I returned to my morning routine, the disturbance now settling into a resolved chapter of my life. Looking ahead, my thoughts turned to future plans, the dreams of travel and meeting new people. The world was wide, and my heart, once burdened by betrayal, now felt lighter with possibilities.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.